When you look closely at emerging agricultural markets, high profit margins at individual processing nodes can be deceiving. Often, localized profits act as a smokescreen, hiding severe macroeconomic vulnerabilities that threaten the entire system. We can see this dynamic clearly by examining the Sato Num enterprise in Yala province, Thailand. This is a regional crop with a massive economic footprint, driven by high consumer demand. Cultivating it is a heavy logistical lift. Yala's agricultural terrain is mountainous and dense, creating immediate geographic friction between the moment a crop is harvested and when it reaches a market. While geography creates friction, the more significant blockage is the financial architecture of the commodity itself. The product moves through a standard, linear supply chain. Farmers grow the crop, collectors aggregate it, and processors package it for the consumer. If we track the capital moving through this chain, extreme imbalances emerge immediately. The processors absorb the bulk of the profit, trapping the value at the very end of the line. Farmers lack direct-to-consumer access, forcing them to sell exclusively to local collectors. Because the consumer price is relatively stable, the nodes aren't working together to grow the market. They are fighting each other over the exact same fixed margin. Individual processing groups are reporting record profits, yet the overall supply chain remains incredibly fragile. These two facts shouldn't coexist in a healthy system. To find the answer, researchers analyzed the precise unit economics, exposed the operational dysfunctions they cause, and deployed a business scenario simulation to force these isolated nodes to integrate. In the first phase of the study, researchers evaluated the unit economics of the processor nodes across 5 distinct community enterprise groups over a 6-month period. This table displays the revenue, cost, and return analysis of the processors, tracking exactly what it costs to turn a fresh pod into shelled seeds. If we isolate the cost section, we can test a raw purchase price assumption of 6.50 baht per fresh pod. At a 6.50 baht purchase price, once you factor in the labor for shelling, the transportation, and the packaging, the margins vanish. Nearly every single enterprise group operates at a net loss. But look at what happens when the model shifts down to a maximum purchase threshold of 5.0 baht per pod. That minor reduction in raw material cost, just 1.50 baht, instantly inverts the margins. Processors can suddenly clear over 3,300 baht in net profit. This basic math creates an aggressive, localized price ceiling. To ensure their own survival, processors draw a hard line. They will not pay more than 5 baht per pod. By locking their buying price, the processors force the local collectors to absorb the margin squeeze, and those collectors immediately pass the pressure upstream to the farmers. Enforcing a strict 5 baht cap optimizes the processor's spreadsheet perfectly, but it mathematically guarantees a zero-sum adversarial relationship with the very people supplying their raw materials. Phase 2 of the research maps the on-the-ground operational reality created by this pricing war. When supply chain nodes are fighting over fractions of a baht, they rely on information asymmetry. They actively hide their operational data from one another to maintain their pricing leverage. This heat map evaluates the actual supply chain management practices taking place among the farmers, collectors, and processors in the region. The overwhelming concentration of red cells across the matrix signifies total non-compliance with collaborative practices. The data exposes a stark contradiction. The Pla-Som Batu Mas enterprise, the group that earned the highest profit margins in Phase 1, fails almost every single collaborative metric on the board. Looking closely at these operational failures, we see a complete absence of joint problem-solving and a systemic refusal to share future sales targets with the people growing the crop. The processors are operating in total isolation. They treat their suppliers as simple transactional endpoints rather than strategic business partners. Without data sharing or quality control feedback loops connecting the nodes, the standard of the agricultural product will degrade over time. The farmers have no incentive and no capital to invest in better yields. The robust local financial returns observed in the first phase are masking a brittle, fragmented system. Under real market pressure, this supply chain will collapse. To break this operational deadlock, researchers initiated Phase 3, an intervention using a business scenario simulation. The methodology was direct. Researchers brought the isolated stakeholders into a single room and forced them to run a simulation that modeled the economics of the entire supply chain simultaneously. When disjointed nodes attempt to operate as a unified system, the friction is severe. Everyone is suddenly exposed to the exact costs of their neighbors. This bar chart presents the simulation data, comparing the projected revenue, total cost, and profit distribution by district across the different stakeholders. Look at the Mewing district data cluster. The simulation exposes an extreme imbalance, where the sellers were projected to capture over 73% of the entire available profit pool. Alternatively, the Bangnangsara district column reveals a different failure point. The downstream optimization by the processors mathematically forces the upstream collectors into negative margins, bankrupting them. The data showed processors that their strict 5-bot pricing cap was actively dismantling their own supply lines. The exercise shifted their focus. The goal was no longer about winning the individual transaction. It became clear that they had to sustain the broader ecosystem to keep the product flowing. Breaking the information asymmetry through data transparency proved to the isolated nodes that starving their suppliers was an existential threat to their own businesses. Months after the simulation concluded, researchers gathered a final set of empirical data to measure the long-term impact. The question was whether exposing the systemic economics in a workshop actually altered supply chain behavior out in the fields. This comparative heat map tracks the supply chain management practices of the districts before and after the scenario simulation training. The visual shift is dramatic. In the Sato and Yala district columns, the red isolation zones have fully converted into green collaborative practices. These green cells represent concrete operational victories. Stakeholders initiated joint procurement planning and established active quality control feedback loops across the chain. Processors and farmers finally began sharing forward-looking sales data. By communicating demand in advance, they aligned the timing of the harvest with actual market requirements. The regional supply chain functions as an integrated matrix defined by shared data and equitable profit distribution. This networked structure absorbs market shocks effectively. When costs fluctuate, margin pressure is collaboratively managed across all nodes, rather than weaponized against farmers. The data provides a clear lesson for supply chain management. Localized unit economics will always fail in the long term if they are not paired with systemic operational integration. Sustaining an enterprise and securing the economic development of a region requires abandoning zero-sum pricing models. The resilience of the chain depends entirely on building strategic networks grounded in equitable benefit sharing.